Okay, in today's class, we will be looking into constructors, how the constructor work, what is a copy constructor, what is a non-parameterized constructor, what is a parameterized constructor, and what is a default constructor. So I will try to give a few examples in order to explain like what this means. So suppose first of all I want to make a class and the class is of a runner. We have a race going on and I want to have information about a runner. So in that case I will go to default package, click on new and make a class. So when I make a class I'll call it runner and I click on finish. So now the runner class is created and now I think of different attributes. So let's say like I define the first attribute, which is a string value, and I'll call it first name, and I make another string value, string last name, and since the runner will be running, so I I'll define like the init the initial distance equal to 0, and I define the final distance equal to 0 again. So the runner will be running, so by default he or she will have a 0 initial distance and 0 final distance. And this is how are the private attributes. These are the private attributes of the runner. Uh, so you can assign the values this way, or you can assign the values based on a constructor. So uh, we if we at this point if we do nothing else, okay, and we go back to the same class, so the first class. So if I let me save this all, and now if I create a runner object, runner, let's call it runner. So this right here is a reference and it's pointing me out that there's an error that the local variable runner is not used. So I will use it and I will create a new runner in this case. So now I have um, instantiated the runner. So before that I had not created any object, but whenever I use a new keyword, I am creating an object and that object is assigned to the runner in this case. So now I will not get any information from the runner because all of its attributes are private. So if we know that in Java all the objects that are created, they have a one super object class. So that object class does indeed give you some functionality. So if you write runner and you click on dot, so you get all these different functionality that is present in the object class, and since every object that is created is inheriting from this object class, so all of these functionality is inherited by this runner automatically. But in this case, since all the attributes are private, so we cannot access any of these attributes, and we can however get these attributes um, uh, through different functions. And so we will need to assign the first name and the last name, and we need to assign the initial distance and the final distance. So um, okay, so now if we come over here, um, you can see that I have created this runner. So this looks very much like a function. Like if you look at this and if you look at this, so the functionality is quite similar. It looks less, not functionality, it looks quite similar. So what over here is a constructor, and whenever we write something like this, so the the compiler, it automatically creates a default constructor because it looks at this implementation, it does not find any constructor over here. So if you create a class and you do not define any constructor, so the compiler creates a default constructor in that case. Okay, so now if I create a default constructor, so I will need to keep it public, because if it's not public, so we cannot do something like this, because this is basically a function call. So in order to call a function, we need to keep it public so that other classes can access it, and we write runner and we keep it empty. So if we keep it empty, so this is now a non-parameterized constructor. So this is not a default constructor. The default constructor is automatically created if you have not defined any other constructor. So this should be kept in mind. So this is not a default constructor. This is a non-parameterized constructor. So it can do something or it can do nothing at all. So that is uh, that depends on what kind of implementation you want to have. So suppose we write system dot out dot println, and it's a notification, and I will write that our runner has been created. So now since I have defined a constructor, and I I have created a runner over here. So once I run this, so it will show me over here that our default constructor sorry, our runner has been created. So if I press play, so it says our runner has been created. So in this case, it's not calling the default constructor, but it's calling a non-parameterized constructor. Now, what is a parameterized constructor? Parameterized constructor is a constructor which is an overloaded constructor in this case. So what that means is that we are going to create a constructor which has the same name as this constructor, but it accepts so since these are the same constructor, that is why it's giving me errors. So in order to differentiate between these two, I will write uh, string fname, which stands for first name, and string lname, which stands for last name. So I can write this. So now it accepts two parameters, and so this becomes a separate constructor than this constructor, even though the name of both the constructors are the same. So that is, since it's overloading the properties of this constructor, so that is why it's called an overloaded constructor. So here we can write first name is equal to fname, and last name is equal to lname. So lname, sorry. So now if we create a object and we assign the first name and the last name, so in that case, uh, a new object will be created, and the assigned names will be assigned to these variables. So suppose I write runner, uh, new runner, which is equal to new runner, and I pass it two names. So let's say the first name is Yon, and the second name is uh, let's call it Carry. So now a second runner is created, and his name is Yon Carry. Okay, so if I play it now, so it says a runner has been created, but once I write a runner has been created, which means like, okay, this code was working. So what about this code? Was this code working or not? So one way of doing this is that you copy this and you paste it over here, and you say a new runner has been created. So once you do this, you press on compile, you make it work, and it works this way. Okay, so you can do it this way. Another way of doing the same thing is that you call this function inside this function. So you call this constructor inside that constructor, and so what will happen is that once this constructor is called, okay, what's the error? Okay, so you do not write this like it this way. What you write is uh, like this. You write this. Um, so what actually is this? This is actually a reference which points towards itself. So when I'm talking about this class and I write this, so basically I'm talking about this class itself. So there's a difference between. So what got me confused is that in C++ you write like this and it accepts it uh, as uh, as a constructor calling. Accept it as calling this constructor. But in Java, it only allows the same thing if you write something like this. So in this case, what will happen that this constructor will be called, it will say a runner has been created, and then it will assign these values over here. So now if I press play, so it says a runner has been created, a runner has been created because we are creating two runners. So basically what we are doing is we are nesting one constructor inside another constructor. So this constructor is nested inside this constructor. You can do things like that. Um, so so now we what we do is so this I think this part is clear, and we should um, we should do documentation as we go along. So you press the, this forward slash, then you put two sterics, and as soon as you press enter, it will create something like this. And you can write the non parameterized parameterized imp, uh, object creation. In this case, let's call it runner creation. And over here, I write this, and I write like creates a runner with first and last name. So you write f name, and then you press tab, and then you write the first name of runner, and here press tab the last name of runner. So once you do this documentation, and if you come to uh, this implementation, let me remove this. So if you write is equal to new and you write runner, and um, come over here, so it says non-parameterized runner creation, and if I write this say uh, Ali, and I write Han. So let me hover it over here. So it says, you can see that it says creates a runner with first and last name, F name, the first name of runner, the last name of runner. So whatever we wrote over here, it's being shown over here as a tip. So, this is the cool thing about this. That once you are doing as you are documenting your class, so it helps you in writing the code in this class. So now suppose now in both the implementation, the initial distance and the final distance, they will stay the same. So now suppose you say, okay, I want to have a runner, but the initial and final distance should be given by the by someone, like as they are uh, creating the object. The final initial and final distance should be given uh, by the user. So what I will do is I will copy this, I will paste this over here, and then I'll add two more parameters. In this I call it idis. Okay, let me name it init this, and int final this. So what I want to do is I want to have the init this should get the value of init this, and the final this should get the value of final this. Now if you write something like this, So the compiler cannot make sense of like which init disk is what. So is this init disk is this init disk, or is this init disk, or is this init disk? So it will get confused like what are we talking about? So this can be the same variable or this can be different variables. So this causes confusion. So in order to so if your parameter which you are passing has the same name as the parameter that you assign, so then what you do is you have to differentiate between the two, and you do this by writing a this over here. So this init disk will get the init distance of this value, and if we alternate it, so this will get the value of this init disk, and which actually makes no sense because the value you are passing is will get overwritten by the default value which has been given to the object. So even though you can do this, but this will make no sense. So it's better to go this way. Again, so if I use the same pointer, same reference, which points toward the same class, and I press dot, so it is showing me the final days. So I will write final days is equal to final days. So now I have created another runner, and that runner is accepting the first name and the last name, uh, initial distance and the final distance. So which means like, okay, let's create another runner, and we have a new runner. Let's call it new runner 1, and the name is, so I'll give my name Umair Khan. Okay, so and then I'll my initial value is 50 meters and my final value is 100 meters. So now I'm calling a third constructor, and once I run this code, so this code is actually calls first of all this constructor, which is this, and then it assigns the first name and the last name value, and it assigns the init distance, final distance. Now what we can do as well in this case is that we call another this constructor, and that is we don't do this, we remove this, but we pass the f name and we pass the l name. So in this case, what will happen that this constructor will end up calling this constructor, and the first name will be assigned here and the last name will be assigned here, and look at this, and now this constructor is going to end up calling this constructor. So all of these three constructors will be called by the same constructor, and you can see that we have reduced the amount of code that we have to write in this case. So now this constructor will end up assigning the first name and the last name. This constructor will end up telling us that the runner has been called, and this constructor is going to assign the initial distance and the final distance. So we have a nested constructor calls in this case, and we can also do this. Okay? And now we can write creates a runner with all values assigned. So we can write this, we can write this, change it quickly, and we write initial distance of the runner, and we write the final distance of the runner. So this constructor has been created. So now we have the default, not the non-parameterized constructor, the parameterized constructor, and another overloaded parameterized constructor. Now what can happen is that you say like, okay, so we are in a race. You might have seen those races where you run to a certain distance and then you pass on this I forget what it's called. It's because this kind of a stick that you give it to the other runner, and then that runner starts running from the point where you left off. So what I want to do is I want to copy the values of the first runner to the values of the second runner. And uh, and uh, uh, I can do this by writing another constructor. I write public runner, but what this constructor accepts is another runner. Let's call him another. So a new constructor will be created, and this constructor is going to accept the values of another runner. And now inside this constructor to we have to assign only the initial distance and the final distance. So we will write init this is equal to another dot final distance, sorry, initial distance, and you will write final this equal to another dot final distance. So in this case, we are passing the partial values of the another runner, because this runner has a different name for the well, it has a different name, but you can also pass the values of the names if you want to this runner as well. So in this case, if I'm going to create another runner, suppose runner, and let's call it temp runner. Temp runner is equal to new runner, and I pass it the new runner. 1. So this temp runner is going to accept the values um, of this new runner, but only these initial and final values. But you can see that over here, the initial value of the new runner 2 should be, sorry, the final value of the new runner should be the initial value. So we should change this final distance. And the final distance in this case, we do not know, so we'll keep it at 0. Okay. So once all of this is done, so our runners are more or less complete, but we will need to set the name of the runners as well. So I create two functions, void set name, and I write string f name, first name, and string l name, and I write uh, first name, first name is equal to f name, and last name is equal to l name. So this will assign the first name and the last name to the runners if I want to. And finally, we can write another function. Let's call it void, and let's call it show. Void show. Oh, okay. I keep forgetting. I haven't put the public over here. So I write public void show, and this will end up showing us all the details of all the runners. So we'll write like system dot out dot print uh, println, and I write uh, runner details are, and let's do it. Let's do it this way. First name, first name, plus first name. And so there should be a plus over here. And let's press enter. There's a plus. Let's press enter. And I write this. So there should be a slash n so that we go to new line. We copy this. And then we have the last name and the initial distance and then the final distance. So we write last name here and last name, and then over here initial distance, and then final distance. So we write init distance and final distance. And since we are not going to add anything over here, we remove this plus sign. So this statement is going to show us all the data of all the runners. So let's save this and let's go back over here. So now suppose if I want to get the details of the first runner, I will write runner dot show, and let's just check it. Okay, so it says runner has been created, runner has been created, runner has been created, and it says runner details are the first name is null, the last name is null, initial is 0, final is 0. It is because we haven't written anything over here. So let's do this for the new runner dot show. We then write new runner 1 dot show, and then we write temp runner dot show. If we run it now, so it says runner has been created. So the first runner details are null null 0 0. The second runner is Ali Khan. So it's Ali Khan, it is 0 0. The third runner is Umair Khan. Umair Khan is 50 50, 50 100. And the last runner, we haven't given it any name. So it's again null null. But the initial distance, so the final distance here was initial distance, and we do not know the final distance. So it will be created like this. And we can further change this into temp runner dot set name, and we can call it any name, John. Let's call it Gold, John Gold. It can be anything. So it's okay, and we get this. So now if you look at this, we have created our four uh, runners, and the details of all the runners can be put in this way. And we can also like create another function which says set distance, and we can assign the initial and final distance in those cases as well. uh, so what's left it is we haven't put these documentation constructors over here. So sorry, documentation comments over here. And so we need to do that, but for this tutorial, I'm ending it over here just to let you know like how constructors can be used in your programs, how you can have a default constructor, a non-parameterized constructor, a parameterized constructor, and a overloaded parametric constructor, and how you are going to nest these functions together, and finally how you create a copy constructor. So this is a copy constructor because it copies the data from one object to another object, and you can define which data to be copied in that constructor. So this is something that you should keep in mind, and I hope that this tutorial was beneficial for you guys to understand the Java concepts. So till next time, Allah Hafiz.